The North Carolina Arboretum is an extremely valuable asset for the University of North Carolina and the state of North Carolina. Sitting in the western part of the state, it's a valuable draw for the public, both within our state and from other states. But beyond that, there are activities going on at the Arboretum, in and around the Arboretum, that are based on natural products from plants. There's an extremely high biodiversity of plants in the Appalachian region, and there are many new discoveries to be made that would be a benefit for human health and that would also act as a driver for job creation in the western part of the state and elsewhere.
The Biotechnology Center is very interested in the natural products that grow in this state. We have noticed and watched worldwide as nutraceuticals or botanicals have become an $86 billion a year industry in the United States alone. And North Carolina is blessed to have approximately 7,000 different species of plants growing in it, and is a site where we are fortunate to have this natural resource here.
One of the very helpful things that North Carolina has done is to set up foundational institutes. The North Carolina Arboretum takes the lead there with the help of the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, and they've set up the Bent Creek Institute, and that institute has the expertise to understand and work with all of the medicinal plants and the natural plants, and they have created a U.S. Botanical Safety Laboratories, which sets the standards for products and has a way of measuring the content to get uniform products.
So what we know right now is that in Japan, about $6 billion of their entire agricultural industry is geared towards the nutraceutical industry. 47% of all Japanese take a natural product. So those can range from any kind of the plants and things like echinacea, things that we're used to seeing here in our market, to products that have been derived like Toxol, aspirin, for example, is another product that occurs naturally. So we see the Chinese market is also a huge market, and there is demand from China for the standardized products that America can create.
So one of the things that's happened in China, because the Industrial Revolution they're going through is being done in a much more accelerated way than the British or the American Industrial Revolution, pollution is becoming an even bigger problem. And through the process of all the industrialization, there's major concerns about especially heavy metals getting into plants. And if botanical plants are a key part of their medical heritage, then this whole issue of plant contamination is a big concern. So the safety work that's been done in Asheville at the Arboretum and the Bent Creek Institute is a very high interest among the Chinese, because having a third party to present the validated safety gives them much more comfort that the products they could be taking from the United States are very high quality.
Over Carolina is one of the strongest states in the nation in terms of biotechnology. Recent studies have shown that the economic impact all in is over $70 billion per year. Much of that work is focused in the Research Triangle Park, but there is a lot going on elsewhere in the state, focused around our universities and elsewhere. The University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and in addition, the North Carolina Arboretum and Bent Creek Institute. The impact that this could have is an extension of the strength of biotechnology that we have in the middle of the state out to the western part of the state. There's so much potential related to the biodiversity that exists in the Appalachian region. There is a strong desire and interest from national interests as well as international partners who are looking to this area of the state. The quality of life, the natural biodiversity is drawing all these interests in, and we're going to see an economic boom, I feel, in the western part of the state, part of which is driven by the biodiversity and the natural products endeavors.
Well, first off, the people living there understand the plants. They know how to grow the plants and utilize the plants. So that gives you a huge advantage. But then the other thing is that the places that are set up now are ready to support the industry, and people want to come to that area to learn about natural products, to utilize natural products, and some of them actually come there to rehabilitate. So all of those reasons is why North Carolina can be a leader.
So natural products really has a great heritage all the way back to the Native Americans as well as the mountain medicine on the Western Mountains. And one of the best examples for a company that has capitalized on that heritage is a company called Gaia Herbs, which is in Brevard, south of Asheville. The founder, Rick Scalzo, created a model that's vertically integrated so that he can assure the safety of his products because they're grown on site. He then can assure the production quality, and to some degree he ends up having safety from the farm to the capsules in the bottle. And that particular safety validation is of great interest for the Chinese because there's very big concerns about adulterated products in China. So having this end-to-end safety solution creates a great model for us to follow as we bring products from other companies in the United States through this hub to have the safety validated by the Arboretum and the United States Botanical Safety Lab for China.
What we would like to do here is become the Napa Valley of natural products. And like wine, we believe we can have an impact economically both nationally and internationally. We're working with companies now in China, in Korea, in Fiji, in Mexico, in Europe, and certainly in North Carolina and locally in this region. Companies like Gaia Herbs in Brevard, or King Bio on the edge of Asheville, which has a national market now, and also companies like Technology Crops International in Winston-Salem. We believe this sector has great promise for both the state and certainly the mountain region.